What if an entire kingdom, its people, its rulers, its armies, was erased before sunrise? What if everything they built for centuries vanished in just 12 hours? And what if the force responsible wasn't an empire, but 20,000 horsemen led by a man the world would one day fear more than death itself, Genghis Khan? This is not a legend. This is a real historical event, and historians still cannot agree on how it happened. A kingdom shielded by harsh terrain. A ruling dynasty convinced no enemy could reach them undetected. Defensive walls that had never been breached. And yet, on one seemingly ordinary morning, Mongol horsemen appeared at their gates like spirits rising from the earth. No warning, no messengers, only the earth-shaking thunder of hooves, followed by a silence that felt like the end of the world. Today we ask the question no one has fully answered. How did Genghis Khan erase an entire kingdom faster than most armies could finish preparing for battle? To understand this, we must begin far from the battlefield, years earlier. The kingdom sat in a quiet valley, prosperous but arrogant. They believed the mountains were their guardians. They believed distance made them untouchable. Worst of all, they believed the Mongols were nothing but tribal nomads. Genghis Khan took that insult personally. Mongol spies slipped into the kingdom long before the attack, posing as merchants, envoys, travelers. For months, they mapped every secret passage, every weak gate, every guard rotation. The kingdom never suspected a thing. At dawn on the chosen day, 20,000 elite horsemen disappeared into the morning mist, riding toward the valley with terrifying purpose. For several days, no one saw them again, and then everything changed. The Mongols did not arrive at the kingdom's borders. They were already inside them, not a handful, not scouts. Entire Mongol units had infiltrated the valley before the attack even began. The kingdom believed it was safe. In reality, it was surrounded. But how do 20,000 warriors move through enemy land without being seen? That answer would be revealed only hours later when the capital heard a distant rumble. A sound so deep that it shook the dust from windowsills. It was the sound of hooves, tens of thousands of them racing toward the heart of the kingdom. By the time the alarm bells rang, the outer defenses had already collapsed, not because they were weak, but because the Mongols had executed a maneuver no army had ever achieved before. And now we reached the moment the kingdom realized the true horror of what was happening. Their strongest fortress, the pride of their entire defense, went silent. No commands. No signals, no survivors, because inside those walls, the Mongols did something that defied every rule of warfare. The fortress had fallen silent, the strongest defensive structure in the entire kingdom. Its pride, its symbol of safety, was now nothing more than a dark shape on the horizon. And inside the capital, panic erupted like wildfire. But how could it fall so fast? How could seasoned defenders be wiped out without sending even a single warning? To understand this, we must pull back the curtain on a strategy so frighteningly precise. Kingdoms across Asia would spend generations trying to copy it. The Mongols didn't attack the fortress from the outside. They attacked it from the inside first. Before the main assault even began, Mongol infiltrators, disguised as merchants and travelers, had already entered the fortress days earlier. They bribed gatekeepers, gathered intelligence, mapped the inner chambers, and identified the single weakness no architect had ever considered. The fortress trusted the people entering it. At the very moment the defenders looked outward for enemies, the true danger was walking calmly through their halls. Meanwhile, the 20,000 horsemen, still unseen by the kingdom's scouts, were closing in. They were not riding in a straight line. They were not following roads. They split into 4 separate columns, moving like shadows around the valley, cutting off every escape route. The kingdom didn't know it yet, but they were no longer defending their borders. They were trapped inside their own land. While the defenders scrambled to understand the silence from their fortress, a second disaster struck. The Mongol infiltrators seized the gatehouse from within. They slipped into the armory, eliminated the key guards, and barricaded the inner doors. When the real Mongol cavalry arrived minutes later, the infiltrators lit a signal fire, one tiny flame seen only by the riders who knew where to look. And in that moment, the gates of the impenetrable fortress opened. This is where the first shockwave hit the capital. The fortress hadn't been destroyed, it had been taken. And now, at the 200-word mark, here is the twist you've been waiting for. Mongol infiltrators didn't just open the gates. They turned the fortress into a Mongol command center. From inside its walls, Mongol signal officers began sending out false commands, using the kingdom's own flag system. Messages declaring all clear. Messages ordering troops to fall back. Messages claiming reinforcements were arriving. The kingdom's generals obeyed, never realizing the enemy had hijacked their communication network. By the time the truth surfaced, thousands of defenders were marching directly into Mongol traps. Within minutes, the capital saw smoke rising from the direction of the fortress. Not black smoke from destruction, but white smoke rising in rhythmic pulses. A pattern, a code, a command. The Mongol cavalry suddenly changed formation. They accelerated, they spread out. They moved with inhuman coordination, as if they knew exactly where every defender was standing. Because they did. Using the fortress's captured signal system, the Mongols were guiding their own army with perfect precision. And now, as the capital's defenders prepared to make their final stand, they realized something horrifying. The Mongols didn't come to conquer the capital. They came to erase it. Because at that exact moment, a lone rider appeared on the horizon, carrying an object so terrifying that the kingdom's commander dropped to his knees when he saw it. The lone rider approached slowly, deliberately, as if the battlefield itself bowed to his presence. His horse was soaked in sweat, but the rider sat tall, unyielding, calm, controlled. Every defender on the walls felt the same creeping dread. He carried something wrapped in crimson cloth. The cloth sagged slightly, the weight beneath it undeniable. A banner, a message, a weapon, no one knew. But the kingdom's commander recognized its shape, and his face drained of color, because he knew exactly what was missing from the fortress. The Mongols had taken more than the walls, more than the gatehouse, more than the armory. They had taken the fortress commander's severed head. The rider stopped within bow range, yet showed no fear. Without breaking eye contact, he raised the crimson bundle, and then slowly, almost ceremonially, he unwrapped it. Gasps echoed along the capital wall. Some soldiers stumbled backward, others froze, unable to speak. The fortress commander's lifeless eyes stared back at them. The message was unmistakable. We took your strongest point in minutes. You will fall even faster. The capital's defenders trembled, not because of the brutality, but because of what followed. The rider lifted the head high, and the Mongol cavalry behind him erupted into a thunderous roar. Hooves struck the earth like war drums. The formation shifted again, tighter, faster, more precise. The capital's defenders scrambled into positions, shouting orders, preparing arrows, bracing the gates. But deep down, everyone knew the truth. This was no ordinary attack. This was annihilation. The Mongols didn't charge the capital. They rode away from it. The defenders watched in utter confusion as 20,000 horsemen pivoted in perfect harmony and thundered toward the forest to the east. Why withdraw? Why abandon an attack that was seconds from overwhelming the city? What did they see? What did they know? The kingdom's commander felt his fear deepen, not lessen. Mongols did not retreat. Mongols did not hesitate. Mongols did not change direction without a reason. Something worse was happening. Within minutes, the answer became clear. Smoke, thick, black, impossible to ignore, began rising from every village surrounding the capital. Not one village, not two, all of them. The Mongols weren't retreating. They were executing a tactic that made them unstoppable, the scorched circle. They destroyed everything outside the capital first. Every resource, every road, every hiding place, every potential ally. Anyone attempting to flee the capital would find only ashes. Inside the capital, panic erupted. People screamed. Soldiers tried to restore order. The commander realized they were trapped in a tightening ring of fire and steel. And then, just as chaos reached its peak, a horn sounded from the northern wall. A single scout sprinted into the courtyard, pale, shaking, barely able to speak. "They're not just destroying the villages," he gasped. "They're building something massive." The commander grabbed him. "What did you see?" And the scout whispered the words that froze every soldier in the courtyard. "They're building engines, machines, siege towers, faster than humanly possible." But the Mongols didn't bring lumber. They didn't bring tools. They didn't even stop long enough to harvest supplies. So where were these massive siege machines coming from? The scouts' words hung in the air like a curse. Siege engines, massive ones, rising from the earth in minutes. Impossible. Irrational. Unthinkable. And yet, smoke hammering and the rhythmic rumble of Mongol labor echoed from beyond the northern ridge. The commander raced to the wall, his breath sharp and uneven. When he looked toward the horizon, his heart stopped. The Mongols weren't cutting trees. They weren't shaping timber. They weren't constructing from scratch. They were assembling pre-built siege engines, transported in secret, carried in pieces by horsemen who moved faster than scouts could track. He watched in horror as one of the machines, its frame towering, its wheels taller than a man, snapped into place like a puzzle piece. Mongol engineers worked with terrifying precision. They didn't shout. They didn't rush. They moved like they had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times, because they had. While the kingdom believed its mountains protected it, Genghis Khan had done the impossible. He had transported siege equipment through terrain no one else dared to cross. He didn't adapt to the landscape, he conquered it. The commander understood the truth too late. This was why the horsemen had turned away from the capital. This was why they had burned the surrounding land. This was why villages were left in ruins. The Mongols weren't retreating, they were clearing space for destruction. By midday, the ring of smoke had grown. Siege towers, trebuchets, ram structures, machines of war rose from every direction, forming a circle of steel around the capital. It looked less like an army and more like a tightening noose. The defenders felt it too, the air changing, the sunlight dimming, the sense of inevitability settling on their skin. Then came the moment no one could explain. At precisely high noon, the Mongol horns sounded. The machines moved, simultaneously, perfectly, as if controlled by a single mind. Missiles flew, walls shook, gatehouses splintered. Every defensive formation collapsed under the weight of relentless, coordinated assault. The capital wasn't fighting an army. It was being erased by a war machine decades ahead of its time. The siege didn't last 12 hours. The battle didn't last 12 hours. The entire kingdom fell in 12 hours because the Mongols had already defeated it months earlier. Through spies, through maps, through bribed officials, through psychological warfare, through complete control of terrain, timing, and terror. By the time the first Mongol horseman was seen, the kingdom was already dead. It just didn't know it yet. As the capital walls cracked, as defenders were pushed to their final positions, as the last gate collapsed, the Mongol banner rose above the smoke. A symbol not just of victory, but of total erasure. Emotion equals Samur, and by nightfall, the kingdom that once believed it was untouchable no longer existed on any map. The Mongols didn't defeat armies. They eliminated possibilities. They removed futures, and what happened that day became a warning whispered across continents. If Genghis Khan wants your kingdom, you no longer have a kingdom. If this story shook you, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because here on Battle Vault, we uncover the battles the world tried to forget, and the truths history tried to bury.